How many of you would like to worry more? Raise your hand if you believe your life would be better if you could only spend more time worrying. No one is going to confess to that, but let's be honest. There are always a few people who are only happy when they're miserable, right? You know people like that, right? Well, don't get me wrong. There's lots to worry about. Our jobs, the stock market, paying the mortgage, how to pay for Christmas presents. Then there's our health or the health of our loved ones. We worry about our children, our parents, inflation, global warming, unemployment, and the list goes on and on. Whether you worry constantly or occasionally, whether you find it intensely painful or just mildly uncomfortable, whether you experience worry as a force that immobilizes you or as a slight distraction, there is a price to pay when our souls are at dis-ease. According to the research, 60 to 90% of all illness can be traced back to the uneasiness of our souls. We all know that stress raises our blood pressure, damages our hearts, lowers our immune systems. The more we worry, the lower our ability to fight infection and disease. There is often a direct correlation between stress and ulcers, heartburn, migraines, heart disease, diabetes, high blood pressure. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. So what are we to do? Well, last week, we talked about a church that was struggling through a season of stress. The church in Philippi was going through a leadership transition, and they were fighting among themselves over the direction of the church. And from his prison cell in Rome, Paul wrote to the Philippians. After a few pleasantries, he said, "You guys need to work this out." As we talked about last week, Paul says, you need to be of one mind. You need to share the same love. And you need to put the needs of others first. Last week, if we would have read farther into the letter, we would find that Paul goes on to warn them to look out for troublemakers and to keep focused on the good news of Jesus Christ. And then Paul gives them a prescription on how to overcome their stress, a prescription for peace. He says, "Rejoice in the Lord always." This, Paul says, is the antidote for the worry and stress they were experiencing. So let's take a look at how Paul puts this in Philippians chapter 4, verses 4 through 7. Would you read with me? "Rejoice in the Lord always. Again I will say, rejoice. Let your gentleness be known to everyone. The Lord is near. Do not worry about anything, but in everything, by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." Rejoice in the Lord always. In every situation. I'll avoid the word circumstance, since not everybody understands that word. In every situation, give thanks to God, and the peace of God will guard your heart and mind. Now, We have to be clear here right from the start. This does not say, give thanks for everything. We're not to give thanks for everything that happens. What it says is that we give thanks no matter what happens. You may not give thanks for the car accident, but you can give thanks that no one was hurt. You may not give thanks for your broken leg, but you can give thanks for doctors and nurses and pain medicine. Paul's not ignoring the struggles. He's just spent 3 chapters talking about the stress the church is going through. What Paul is saying is that even in the midst of the struggle, even as you're asking God for help, give thanks. And the peace of God will guard your heart and mind. The secret to this peace, Paul says, is to replace worrying with giving thanks. We all know that worry is a useless emotion. We worry because we lack the knowledge of the future. We worry because of what might happen. We jump into fear over things that may never come to pass. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, during his inaugural address, as he assumed the presidency in the depth of the Great Depression, made it clear, our greatest fear is fear itself. The truth is, worrying accomplishes nothing. So, Paul says, replace worrying with giving thanks. When worry comes upon you, make the intentional decision to count your blessings. Now, if you're a perpetual worrier, that's going to be tough at first. But even if it's difficult, we need to keep at it. And if we make the intentional decision to count our blessings, if we make the intentional decision to give thanks to God, we'll find that that intentional process will refocus us. And ultimately, it will give us a new perspective. Let me tell you a secret. If you really want to be happy, no one can stop you. If you really want to be happy, it's not dependent on your circumstances. It's not dependent on what other people do. If you want to be happy and you make that intentional decision, no one can stop you. Remember how Paul puts it in this passage. He says, rejoice in the Lord always. I say it again, rejoice. Paul's kicking it up here. He's taking us from that counting our blessings, that giving thanks, and he says, rejoice. It's one thing to go through a mental exercise of counting our blessings. It's another thing to move from giving thanks to rejoicing. One can be purely in our heads, purely intellectual. The other is a matter of the heart. So, my question to you as we anticipate this Thanksgiving holiday is, when was the last time you really rejoiced? Not the last time you said thank you. Not the last time you counted your blessings. When was the last time you really rejoiced? When was the last time your heart danced? If you can't remember the last time, then it's time to kick it up. It's time to move from thanksgiving to rejoicing. Most of us will observe Thanksgiving Day on Thursday. For some, it will be a time of great feasting and family. For others, it will be a reminder that family is far away. And for still others, it will be a day that we wished family was far away. That came too close to home for many of you. However we celebrate, Thanksgiving is an opportunity for the peace of Christ to fill our hearts and minds, regardless of our situation or our circumstances, regardless of what's going on in our lives. We can move from worrying to giving thanks, to rejoicing. And in that journey, we can find the joy and peace of Christ. It shouldn't be lost on any of us that the holiday of Thanksgiving was founded in hardship. The Pilgrims had a rough time of it, and yet they took time to rejoice in the blessings of God. When George Washington declared the first National Day of Thanksgiving, it was as this newborn nation was still recovering from war. And it was as Abraham Lincoln was counting the costs of the Civil War that he issued his Thanksgiving proclamation. Even if this Thanksgiving is not a gold medal winner for you, we all have much for which to give thanks. Paul said, "Let your requests be made known to God." It's okay to say, "God, this isn't my best day." It's okay to say to God, "This isn't the way I wanted my life to be." It's okay to say to God, "I need help." But Paul says, as you make your requests to God, do it with thanksgiving. Do it in the midst of rejoicing. Don't let your holiday just be a day of overeating. Kick it up from thanksgiving to rejoicing. Turn it into a day in which we rejoice together so that the peace of Christ may rule in our hearts and minds.